Peace be unto you, all you angels, angels of the Most High. From the King, the Holy One of Israel, blessed is his name. Come in peace, ministering angels, servants of Adonai. From the King who reigns, the Holy One of Israel, blessed is his name. Shalom, Shalom,
Welcome everyone to another session. We are going to have a discussion and going to be talking some more about this issue that we have been going over for quite a few weeks. And we're going to look into the book of First Enoch tonight in the account of Noah and how the Nephilim managed to make it in after the flood. You would think that when the flood happened, one of its primary goals was to wipe out the Nephilim, of which we know from various sources are today, at least the remnants of which are left. That would be the demons that are upon the earth. These are the souls, the disembodied souls of the Nephilim. According to the book of Jubilees, there was a certain portion that was reserved to roam the earth aimlessly, looking for poor souls to inflict discomfort upon or even to infect, and that they were used to punish those who do wickedness, who are violating our Heavenly Father's laws. And so we're going to talk about this whole idea of how do we get to the Nephilim after the flood. So we're going to look here at First Enoch. Reading portion here says here, First Enoch account of Noah fathering the post-flood Nephilim. Okay, so First Enoch teaches that Noah and his sons sired the post-flood Nephilim through normal sexual relations. However, it offers little explanation on just how this came about. The general tenor of First Enoch is that Noah was of such angelic spiritual stature that it was conceivable he could sire giants like those that the Watchers had done before. Now, I know where this is going. This is not what the theory of this book is, because remember, we had touched on this in the previous video, that it was through Ham's wife, who happened to have some of that Nephilim blood in her. And that's how she ended up getting into, how the Nephilim ended up getting into the post-flood world. And if you remember reading in 1st and 2nd Samuel, One of the most famous kings of Israel, in fact, I would wager to say the most famous king of Israel, is credited with wiping them out. Now, did he wipe out every single remnant that was ever upon the earth? I mean, we talked about some pretty far-fetched ideas like, the Bigfoot character and the abominable snowman. Are they remnants of the giants still running around the earth? Some people seem to spend a good portion of their life chasing these reports. If you read, if you listen to some of these TV broadcasts, where they're trying to find Bigfoot, and they swear that they saw Bigfoot and so on. So we talked about a lot of those interesting discussions last time. But continuing on here, it says the first hints that Noah had such a capability begins with the account of his birth in chapter 106. And this is in Enoch, by the way. Those passages relate that at birth, Noah had a supernatural spirituality similar in nature to that of the Watchers. This was so much so that Noah's father feared that Noah was fathered by angels. Now, I remember this account. When Noah was born, his body and hair were white as snow. His eyes shone with a light that filled a room with brightness when they opened. Indeed, when the midwife first lifted the infant, Noah opened his mouth and conversed with Elohim, blessing him. Noah's father Lamech became very fearful that Noah was not his son, but rather a seed spawned of angels. Afraid that Noah's birth might bring some great judgment upon the earth, Lamech fled to his father Methuselah and asked him to seek Enoch, his grandfather. This was because Yahweh had taken Enoch alive from the earth, so that Enoch dwelt no more with man, but rather with the angels. So that's in Genesis 5:24. Remember where it says in Genesis chapter 5, it says Enoch was not found. And the exact wording, let's take a look at that Genesis 5:25, just to get an idea there. See if we can get that to come up. Okay, and Methuselah lived 187 years and begat Lamech. Okay, all right, let's see if we can get the whole chapter here. Can we get the whole chapter? How about that? All right, let's go here. And it says here, and Enoch lived after, okay, and begat all the days. This is not Enoch, though. Okay, and verse 24, and Enoch walked with Elohim, and he was not. That's what it's talking about. Right there. For all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with Elohim, and he was not. So that's what that's referencing there. I have run up on a Bigfoot. Spooky. That's interesting because a lot of people that say that they saw Bigfoot, they say that there's a very deep sense of foreboding about it, and they're filled with fear. If you watch these shows, there's like some common threads all throughout them, and then they also say there is a horrible smell associated with them.
We didn't. I didn't smell anything, but there was definitely a very eerie feeling. It done a growl that was something like out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah.
And its way of telling us to leave after, because we was on a night, I'll just say a night walk, doing a training exercise. And after it heard the iron go cling, cling several times, it pushed over a tree. I don't know, that was probably 3 foot round, a live tree, not a dead one. And then it just disappeared. I mean, but me, Ash, and David, we won't never forget it.
Yeah, I wonder if the evil that's emanating from that creature is so overwhelming that it has to impact people that are close to it. It has to It's almost like fear is like pervading the air and soaking into individuals that are close to it. Very wild. Thanks for sharing that, brother. Yes, I think that there's things that are unexplainable out there. Okay. And science doesn't explain everything, obviously, as you well know. I mean, science just counts 90% of what's in the Bible. So, not to say that the Bible is anti-science. Actually, I think the Bible does back up true science in many ways. But let's continue on here. So we're talking about Noah and how Noah had this hair white as snow, and how basically how his eyes shone with a light that filled the room with brightness, and that he conversed with Elohim. And so here's Lamech. He is very fearful, and he goes to Methuselah to seek Enoch, his grandfather. This was because Yahweh had taken Enoch alive from the earth, so that Enoch dwelt no more with man, but rather with the angels. Okay, and then Enoch would be uniquely able to tell them the truth about the matter. So here's First Enoch 106, 1-7. And after some days, my son Methuselah took a wife for his son Lamech, and she became pregnant by him and bore a son. And his body was white as snow and red as the blooming of a rose, and the hair of his head and his long locks were white as wool, and his eyes beautiful. And when he opened his eyes, he lighted up the whole house like the sun, and the whole house was very bright. And thereupon he arose, and the hands of the midwife opened his mouth and conversed with the Lord of righteousness. And his father Lamech was afraid of him and fled and came to his father Methuselah. And he said unto him, I have begotten a strange son, diverse from and unlike man, and resembling the sons of God of heaven. And his nature is different, and he's not like us, and his eyes are as the rays of the sun, and his countenance as glorious. And it seems to me that he has not sprung from me, but from the angels, and I fear that in his days a wonder may be wrought on the earth. And now, my father, I am here to petition you and implore you that you may go to Enoch our father and learn from him the truth, for his dwelling place is among the angels. Now, isn't that something that Lamech apparently would think that Methuselah could go to where Enoch apparently was, among the angel, unless it's talking about it's now, in that movie Noah that starred Gerald Butler, is it something? I think that's how you
Russell Crowe.
yeah,
Russell Crowe.
Russell Crowe, that's it. Yeah, okay. It's interesting because it says that he was Noah at the time showed him very close and in common with the watchers that were still upon the earth. It's got that component to that movie. Okay, so in verse 13-19 of chapter 106, the prophet Enoch reassured Methuselah that Noah was indeed the son of Lamech and not of angels. However, Enoch also prophesied that Noah's birth signaled that a great flood would bring destruction over the entire earth and slay all men. Their curse was because certain angels had broken the command of Elohim and fathered the Nephilim. Only Noah, his 3 sons, and their wives would survive the flood. Okay, so here's the passage. First Enoch 106, 13-19. And I, Enoch, answered, said unto him, the Lord will do a new thing on the earth, and this I have already seen in the vision, and make known to you that in the generation of my father Jared, some of the angels of heaven transgress the word of Yahweh. And behold, they commit sin and transgress the Torah, and have united themselves with women and commit sin with them, and have married some of them, and have begot children by them. Yea, there shall come a great destruction over the whole earth, and there shall be a great deluge and a great destruction for 1 year. And this son who has been born unto you shall be left on the earth, and these 3 children shall be saved with him. When all mankind that are on the earth shall die, he and his sons shall be saved. And they shall produce on the earth giants, not according to the sight, but according to the flesh, and there shall be a great punishment on the earth, and the earth shall be cleansed from all impurity. And now make known to thy son Lamech that he who has been born is in truth his son, and call his name Noah, for he shall be left to you, and he and his son shall be saved from the destruction which shall come upon the earth on account of all the sin and all the unrighteousness which shall be consumed on the earth in those days, in his days. And after that, there shall be no more unrighteousness than that which was first consummated on the earth. For I know the mysteries of the holy ones. For he, the master, has showed me and informed me, and I have read them in the heavenly tablets. Okay, so interesting here. So he basically is reassuring his father Lamech, you know, that Noah's father Lamech, that hey, this guy, this boy is normal. He just has a very special place. You know, he has a very special place. So let me check our text here. Arian Anderson's. Interesting. Okay, thanks for those comments. Okay, so quite amazingly, Enoch prophesied in verse 17 that Noah and his sons would produce giants once again on the earth after the flood, and that this would usher in yet another round of punishment on the earth. Now, isn't that something? How do you reconcile that? Except as to say that maybe it's talking about, you know, his Ham's wife having relations with. The belief is she had relations with Noah while he was drunk, and this produced Canaan, and he was cursed. And it's a shocking revelation. At first blush, it almost seems to condemn Noah being polluted by the Nephilim lineage, for how else could he sire such giants? Some try to construe a positive spin to Noah spawning giants, although the general tenor of First Enoch makes it seem plausible that Noah and his demi-angelic nature could sire giants of righteousness. Such a positive interpretation of verse 17 is virtually impossible. This is because Noah's giants bring judgment yet again upon the earth. Their paradox is resolved by knowing that it was not Noah or his sons who carried the defiled lineage across the flood. It was Ham's wife. In Genesis, we shall learn that of an event in which Noah commits adultery with her, thereby siring from her a son named Canaan. Canaan was the focal point of the post-flood defilement. His prominence over the other seed of Ham and his wife was because Canaan's father was Noah. Noah's extraordinary angelic nature supercharged Canaan's Nephilim defilement. Now, it's interesting that basically this idea of Noah siring with Ham's wife, producing this giant lineage. See, I was going somewhere with this. It'll come back to me, guys. It'll come back to me. Let's go ahead, Vicky.
So Ham's wife and Noah commits adultery with Ham's wife.
Yeah.
And that offspring is Canaan, and
that's what I wanted to. That's what I wanted to mention. Yeah, you reminded me. Who was Canaan's offspring? Remember Nimrod?
Yeah, right.
Remember Nimrod? And Nimrod was, it says in the book of Jasher, he found a book or tablets that had secrets that were passed on by the Nephilim. And this is what gave him the ability to basically, by violence and any other way, could even be sorcery.
Well, it says he became a Gibborim. The way I read it, there was something in there, he done something to himself that made him, I guess, morph into, you know, a Nephilim or a Gibborim, they calls it.
Yeah, and that's how it's believed that's how he was able to get that entire, the known world united under a tyrannical regime. That's the idea, right? Okay. Remember, because in the days of Terah, Noah's father, it was extremely tyrannical. And they were steeped in witchcraft and in sorcery and in idolatry. They were steeped very deeply into that. Okay, so this is 7:2. The Genesis account of Noah fathering the post-flood Nephilim. A careful study of Genesis reveals that the origin of the post-flood Nephilim defilement came from an adulterous encounter between Noah and Ham's wife. This account is rather obtusely documented in Genesis 9:20 through 27. In those passages, Noah gets drunk and uncovers himself in the tent of Ham's wife. Ham then enters the tent and angrily discovers Noah's nakedness, implying he saw his father committing an adultery with his wife. Noah later realized that Canaan was conceived from his illicit union, and he curses his ill-begotten son. He curses him to be a servant of servants. This means that all of Ham's descendants were cursed, and that Canaan was cursed above them all. Canaan and his descendants became the center point of the post-flood Nephilim defilement. According to the Israelite spies, the Canaanites were all men of great stature and the source of many Gibborim, which would mean men of great strength, great size, great strength. Furthermore, all the post-flood Nephilim tribes mentioned in the Bible cohabitated with the descendants of Canaan. This all suggests that Canaan was the root source of the post-flood giants. Okay, in Genesis 9:20 and 27, account of Noah's drunken exploits has long puzzled scholars. All that may be surmised from a cursory reading of the King James Version translation is that Noah got drunk and uncovered himself in his tent. His son Ham then came and saw his father's nakedness. When Noah awoke, he knew that Ham had done to him. Noah then cursed Ham's son Canaan, saying he would be a servant of servants unto his brothers. And so, I often puzzled about this passage long time ago, even when I was younger. I mean, what in the world does this mean? But it says Genesis 9:20 to 27. Let's see here. Okay, somebody got a comment there. There's a story that Gilgamesh hides on the roof of the ark. Also, it's been a while, so I don't remember any source. Epic of Gilgamesh, baby. That's interesting. That could be too. Remember that a lot of this logic is process of deduction. So is it possible that one of the Nephilim stowed away on the ark? But the only thing is that Peter says 8 souls were saved alive on the ark. He literally counts the number. So you've got Noah and his wife, that's 2. You got 3 sons, that's 5, and then 3 more is 8. The wives of the sons, right? Okay. Genesis 9:20 to 27. And Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard, and he drank of the wine, was drunk, and he was uncovered within his tent. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his 2 brethren without. And Shem and Japheth took a garment and laid it upon both their shoulders and went backwards and covered the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and they saw not their father's nakedness. And Noah awoke from his wine and knew that his younger son had done unto him. Now, literally, he's blaming Ham. So what does this mean? Does it mean that Ham prostituted his wife to Noah? Or does it mean it's just, and he said, cursed be Canaan, a servant of servants shall he be unto his brethren. And he said, blessed be the Lord God of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. Yeah, Noah was the 8th preacher of righteousness. Okay, Vicky, go ahead. Got your hand up there.
Well, it reminds me of of Lot and his daughters.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if maybe the biblical account was altered, because in order to, the purpose would be because it stated that Noah was perfect in his generations.
Mm-hmm.
So, you kind of want to look at Noah as this quote unquote perfect preacher of righteousness, and to suggest that maybe, what this is saying, if it's the truth, and then the biblical count maybe was changed because this doesn't give Noah a very good look.
Yeah. And it says here precisely what happened in this incident has long been debated. This because Genesis account is obtuse and riddled with mysticism. It is widely acknowledged that the idiom of having one's nakedness uncovered is associated with improper sexual relations. Some suppose that Ham had homosexual relations with his father while he was passed out. Others hold the more literal view that Ham merely dishonored his father by looking upon his nude body. However, holders of these opinions are stupefied as to why Ham's son Canaan bore the brunt of the curses and not Ham himself. This implicates Canaan as somehow being involved in the event, even though Genesis does not appear to specify how. Okay, yeah, I reject the homo thing too. To address this, many scholars conjecture that Ham and Canaan had previously fought with Noah over various possible issues, and that the uncovering of Noah's nakedness was the straw that broke the camel's back. Others conjecture that perhaps Canaan was the one who had committed the homosexual act against Noah. However, there is absolutely no evidence to support such theories. As we shall see, the true events surrounding Noah's drunkenness are rather plainly written in the literal Hebrew of Genesis 9. A careful study will reveal all. Okay, so. Okay, 166, let's make sure we're on the right one here. Okay, so uncovering one's nakedness and what it means in the Old Testament. Okay, so the key to understanding the strange events surrounding Noah's drunkenness is knowing the precise meaning of the Hebrew idiom of having one's nakedness uncovered. As we shall see, to have one's nakedness uncovered indicates that a man's lineage has been polluted by improper heterosexual relations between two near family members that could result in defiled seed being generated to that man's lineage. A man's lineage can be polluted by either himself having illicit sex or a near kinsman having illicit sex. For example, if a man has incestuous relations with his daughter, the seed of this act will defile the man's lineage, as that seed will be cursed. Likewise, if a son has incestuous relations with his mother, this defiles his father's lineage. This is true because not only has the son defiled his own lineage, but he has also defiled his father's lineage, passing through him. This above understanding of uncovering one's nakedness is based on the repeated biblical uses of the phrase. The Hebrew word used for nakedness in the idiom is erva. Okay, erva is used 54 times in the Old Testament. In all these appearances, it connotes a spiritual nakedness that when exposed results in a person's experiencing shame and uncleanness. The verb used in verse 21 to describe how Noah's nakedness was uncovered is galah. This word is paired with erva in 33, or erva's 54 uses in the Old Testament. In all but one of these 33 pairings, the galah uncovering of one's erva clearly refers to the incestuous or adulterous sexual relations between near kin. The meaning for uncovering one's erva is best illustrated in the passages of Leviticus 18, 6 through 19, where resides 24 of the 33 usages of erva in this sense. Okay, so we have Leviticus 20, 11 through 21 holding the rest. Okay, so let's see here. Maybe she had the nip of the wine also. All right, so Leviticus, none of you shall approach to any that is near to kin to him to uncover their nakedness. I am the Lord. The nakedness of thy father or the nakedness of thy mother shall you not uncover. She is your mother. You shall not uncover her nakedness. The nakedness of thy father's wife shall you not uncover. It is thy father's nakedness. The nakedness of thy sister, the daughter of thy father or the daughter of thy mother, whether she be born at home or born abroad, even their nakedness shall you not uncover. The nakedness of thy son's daughter or thy daughter's daughter, even their nakedness shall you not uncover, for theirs is thine own nakedness. The nakedness of thy father's wife's daughter, begotten of thy father, she is thy sister. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of thy father's sister. She is thy father's near kinswoman. You shall not uncover the nakedness of thy mother's sister, for she is thy mother's near kinswoman. You shall not uncover the nakedness of thy father's brother. You shall not approach to his wife. She is thine aunt. You shall not uncover the nakedness of thy daughter-in-law. She is thy son's wife. You shall not uncover her nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of thy brother's wife. It is thy brother's nakedness. You shall not uncover the nakedness of a woman and her daughter, neither shall you take her son's daughter or her daughter's daughter to uncover her nakedness, for they are her near kinswoman. It is wickedness. Neither shall you take a wife to her sister to vex her, to uncover her nakedness beside the other in her lifetime. Also, you shall not approach unto a woman to uncover her nakedness as long as she is put apart from her uncleanness. Okay, so there's all the basic commands there in Leviticus. An important concept in Leviticus 18 is that committing an illicit sexual act with a near kinswoman leads to uncovering the nakedness of a man whose lineage is considered passing through her. Thus, a father's nakedness is uncovered when his son has sexual relations with the son's mother. Verse 7, or stepmother, verse 8. Verse 8 further elaborates that the of your father's wife is also your father's This concept is perhaps laid out best in verse 10, where a father is warned not to uncover the of his granddaughter, for their is his own Thus, a man can uncover his own by polluting his own lineage with illicit seed. This is an important note. We shall see that the literal Hebrew of Genesis 9:21 indicates that Noah uncovered his own nakedness. Interesting. Yeah, so by command, it could have been Noah's with Ham's wife. Yeah. Leviticus 18:7 and 14 may seem to indicate that a man's can be uncovered through homosexual acts. However, as we shall see, this is not the case. The prohibition against a man uncovering his father's in Leviticus 18:7 is really directed at his father's wife, which the verse clarifies in its concluding statement. This is true because the mother's and the father's are the same via verse 8. Likewise, the prohibition against a man uncovering the nakedness of his father's brother in Leviticus 18:14 is really directed at him not uncovering the of the brother's wife, which the verse again makes clear in its concluding statement. As Hamilton and Bassett note, uncovering of one's never refers to homosexuality, but rather to forbidden heterosexual relations with close kin. That's the point. So the homosexual viewpoint is out. They point out there are numerous passages in Leviticus speaking against homosexuality and bestiality. Those passages never speak of homosexuality as an act of uncovering one's nakedness, but rather as acts of abomination. There is a final possible hint at the meaning of the idiom for uncovering one's nakedness. This hint stems from a wordplay concerning the literal meaning of the word for nakedness, Irva. Irva comes from the root ara, which means to pour out or to empty. Irva thus most literally means issuances. It probably came to mean nakedness in sense that when the body's issuing portals are uncovered, which would be the anus and genitalia, a person is naked. However, a man's progeny is really an issuance of his seed. Thus, when a man uncovers his nakedness, he is shaming his issuance, which would be his seed. Okay, so 7:22, Noah uncovered his own nakedness. From our study above, we now see that when Genesis 9:22 states Noah's was uncovered, this implies there was an improper sexual relationship committed between close relatives of Noah. But who committed the offending act? Hamilton and Bassett hold that it was Ham having incestuous relations with his mother. However, that theory suffers two major faults. First, it does not explain how Canaan came to inherit the Nephilim lineage. As previously deduced, both Noah's wife and Ham had to be clear of Nephilim defilement. If Canaan were the result of their union, he could not inherit Nephilim descent. Second, Hamilton and Bassett's contention does not match the literal Hebrew of Genesis. Verse 22 does not state that Ham uncovered Noah's Rather, it states that Ham merely saw Noah's Okay, so Ham was a passive observer. Furthermore, the literal Hebrew of verse 21, this is what makes me think is maybe Ham prostituted his wife to Noah. You know, it's that idea, because Maybe he was trying to take advantage of Noah's power and get a son that had that, possibly. Maybe that was the thinking in some way. I don't know. Furthermore, go ahead, Vicky.
I hate to keep asking, but it doesn't seem to me like it could be that though, because of the way that the commands are written in what you read. So it doesn't say that Noah uncovered Ham's nakedness, which is described in Leviticus that you just read.
Mm-hmm.
So if that had happened, wouldn't it have said Noah uncovered Ham's nakedness, which is his wife? Because the way that it's defined,
Yeah,
if I sound like I'm nitpicking, I'm really not trying to.
yeah, I hear what you're getting at, and that's a good point. Let's see what else he has for proof here, for his proofs that he's positing here. Furthermore, the literal Hebrew of verse 21 is quite clear that in his drunkenness, Noah uncovered his own urva. As we have seen from our discussions of Leviticus 18:10 above, Noah uncovered his own urva indicates that he committed the offending sexual act. There are precious few near kinsmen with whom Noah could have committed the offending sexual act. The only known women are the 3 wives of his son. One might theorize that an unspecified granddaughter could be the culprit. However, the time needed for such a speculative granddaughter to grow to maturity does not fit the timescales implied by the passage. Furthermore, any such granddaughter would not explain Canaan's central role in the episode. We are therefore left with only one viable candidate for Noah's sexual indiscretion, and that's Ham's wife. This is because Noah's offense concerning his son Ham and his firstborn Canaan. We can safely conclude that Noah had to have had adulterous relations with Ham's wife, and that Canaan was very likely the result. You know, this kind of reminds me of what happened in Hillsdale College in Michigan. Hillsdale is considered a very conservative county. And there was something in the news many, many years ago where the president of the entire college was called on the carpet, essentially, in one of these big, I guess it was like a party or something. His son confronted him about him committing adultery with his son's wife. And it caused such a furor in Hillsdale County. The news picked it up, and he ended up having to step down from that position. So it is something that happens in a sinful sense. I just thought I would throw that in there, but I remember that even today that was in the news. Continuing on here, there are many other intriguing clues in Genesis 9. Let's see, indicating Noah had sexual relations with Ham's wife. In verse 21, besides relating that Noah uncovered his own nakedness, committing the offending act himself, literally states that Noah uncovered himself in her tent. This implies Noah had sexually defiled his lineage by uncovering himself in some woman's tent. Another clue to Noah's adultery comes from a fascinating ambiguity in verse 24. The verse has 2 equally valid yet opposing interpretations of the literal Hebrew. In the first interpretation, the passage could be literally read to say that when Noah awoke, he knew what he had yielded to himself was his youngest son. This means that Noah awoke from his drunkenness and knew he had conceived to himself his youngest son, Canaan. In the second interpretation, the verse could literally be read to say that Noah awoke and knew what his younger son had yielded to him. This is the traditional reading, and it means that Noah knew that Ham had yielded something to him. When applied to the notion of Noah's adultery, this reading implies that Noah awoke and knew that his youngest son Ham had yielded to him a defiled grandson in Canaan. Therefore, Noah cursed Canaan. One logical deduction for how Noah could learn such information from his drunken escapade is that after Noah got drunk and was seduced by Ham's wife, he awoke and realized the type of woman she was. Noah understood Ham's wife was a seductress. defiled by defiling the lineage. He thereby cursed Ham's firstborn. My literal translation of Genesis 9:20-24 is below. The word-by-word breakdown is given in table 7:1. So here's the Hebrew over here. And see here. And Noah became a man of the ground, and he planted a vineyard, and he drank from the wine, and he was drunk, and he uncovered himself in the midst of her tent. Interesting. Let's take a look at that. Let's see. Covered himself in the midst. Oh, look at that. It does use Ohelah of her tent. Wow. There it is. Ohelah. That's feminine singular. Okay. Vahiro and saw Ham, Avi, his father of Canaan. Okay. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and he told the two of his brothers in the way. And Shem and Japheth took the garment and laid it upon the shoulder of both, and they walked backwards. And will they cover the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and the nakedness of their father they did not see. And Noah awoke from his wine, and they knew what he had yielded to himself was his youngest son. And he said, cursed is Canaan, a servant of servants, he shall become to his brothers. Now, this is literal translation option 2. And Noah, this is verse 24. And Noah awoke from his wine, and he knew his youngest son had yielded to him. Okay. The dual interpretation of verse 24 are possible because of an almost purposeful uncertainty in the text concerning who is actively doing the yielding in the passage. The ambiguous phrase is asa liv, yielded to him. Okay, there's asa, which means making or doing. The phrase can mean either that it was Noah yielding to himself or that Ham yielding to Noah. This uncertainty built into the text can be easily demonstrated by 4 of the other 5 other uses of the phrase asa liv. Okay, so let's take a look at where is that asa liv. That's verse 24. Oh, there it is right there, to him. Actually, it's asa lo, to him, asa lo. But he's got a vet here. That might be a modern Hebrew rendition, asa lo. Unless there might be a hirik under there normally. He doesn't have the nakud here. So that would make that a vet, a vav, if there's a hirik under there, leave. All right, so okay, so the first comes in 1 Samuel 19:18. There David flees from Saul and tells what Saul, Asaliv, had made to him. In this case, the phrase is understood much as in the traditional reading of Genesis 9:24 and supports the traditional reading that Noah knew what Ham had made to him. However, the remaining 3 uses all demonstrate the alternative reading of Genesis 9:24, that Noah knew what he had made to himself. Okay, so the first comes in 2 Chronicles 32:27. That passage relates how Hezekiah, Asab-Lev, made to himself much riches. This continues in verse 29, where it is related that he, Asab-Lev, provided himself, made to himself many cities. And a final use of the phrase in, let's see, what is this here? SO39. Song of Songs. It is related how King Solomon, Asab-Lev, made to himself many chariots. Thus, the alternative reading that Noah made to himself a son is supported by example more in the Bible than traditional reading. So 3 out of 4 is that he's made to himself. So that's the point here, that this part right here, it had had yielded to himself. Interesting that's that reading indicates that it must be that Noah had a child to himself through illicit relations with, by process of deduction, Ham's wife, because it's the progeny that's connected to Ham that is cursed. From the quadrant of Ham anyway, even though Ham was not, in this theory, it would not be Ham. Ham is the father. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so thus the alternative reading that Noah made to himself a son is supported by example more in the Bible than the traditional reading. Okay, so let's take a look at this here. The mystical message from the Hebrew of Genesis 9:20-24. Despite the numerous textual evidences that indicate Noah's culpability, the most striking clue for his guilt is mystical. Okay, that's fine, Vicky. It stems from the pervasive and consistent picture of Noah's guilt obtained from the mystical PFA meanings. That's the principle of first mention. I think first, something like that, using the principle, the PFA meanings reveal that the pious Noah was in a sexual transgression when he got drunk and uncovered himself in the tent of an unsavory whore. According to the PFAs for the words in each passage, the following mystical information may be derived from the account of Noah's nakedness being uncovered. Each word's PFA will be covered in detail later. Verse 21 relates that Noah's drinking denotes a drinking that looks like disesteems and forfeits rights to a blessed lineage. The wine is that which one under a vow to Yahweh should not partake. His drinking from the wine is an erring of a priest and prophet that causes them to stumble in judgment and vision. He is swallowed up in this wine. I think that's in reference to Proverbs. When he uncovered himself in the midst of her tent, the word her tent refers to a prostitute and whore. So this implies that maybe Ham's wife seduced Noah being in a drunken state and he didn't have his wits about him. Being in the midst of this tent means that Noah is caught in the division between the holiness of God and the house of God and the defilement of sin in a heap of ruins. Verse 22 relates to Ham came purposefully to witness Noah and his wife's nakedness. That's where I thought he was going with this, which was also Noah's, and to take her back. This spine is held against Ham as an accusation by Noah and Elohim. When Ham saw Noah's nakedness, he saw what Yahweh considered goodness, and that this goodness would be separated from Ham and his wife's darkness. Because of his seeing the nakedness of his father, Ham left Noah and clung unto his sinful wife. The term his brother, I wonder if it's implying here that when Ham saw this, he realized that he was going to take his wife back anyway, even though she had committed adultery against him with Noah. And that if he had basically exposed her to, I guess it would be judgment. It would be death, wouldn't it? The wages of adultery is death, according to Torah. But he didn't. He clung unto a sinful wife. The term his brothers relates that Ham's brothers were righteous men modeled after Abel, and that Ham himself had become as Cain. When Ham told his two brothers in the street, it was to lure them inside the tent for Ham's own selfish desire for revenge. When Ham told his two brothers what he had seen, he was as a man that had escaped from the place of calamitous adulterous event. In his telling, Ham was bearing witness to what had happened. By Ham's witness, his brothers would be able to redeem their father from this situation. So he must have been passed out in the tent, in Ham's wife's tent. In this understanding, Noah was passed out. After he had relations, they were both naked in Ham's wife's tent. Notice that in the ancient understanding, Abraham had his tent, Sarah had her tent, Hagar had her tent, and all of the concubines that Abraham had their tent. They had their own tent. And that could be because of the laws of Niddah. So that's the implication there, I think. Then verse 23 states that Shem and Japheth entered the tent and took the cloth to cover their father. They did this in order to protect and take care of their father. In laying the cloth upon their shoulders before walking backwards, they separated themselves from Noah's uncleanness. And the cloth they covered Noah with is the bloody bed linen of a bride that is required to prove she was a virgin on the night of her sexual consummation with her husband. This bloody garment is the evidence that the man giving the woman away in marriage needs to defend himself against, what is this here? This is all interesting to me anyway. Charges that he gave away a defiled bride. Noah's being covered in the bloody garment indicates that he is guilty of sending a defiled bride unto Ham, and that he is responsible for this defilement. Because remember that it says, now this is kind of interesting because remember, as a punishment and as a object lesson in Hosea was told to take a harlot. But let's say if a man has a wife and she commits adultery against him, well, it's like a chimeric thing. She has another man's seed in her bosom. So I wonder if that's kind of where he's going with this. And so therefore, instead of Ham receiving her back, she should have been exposed to judgment. The covering of Noah with this garment was the covering of sin from the view of Elohim. This sin was man's procreation of Nephilim defilement, which had existed on the earth before the flood. Okay, so maybe that's the issue right there in particular, because she had that. The cloth itself was the cursing agent of the sin it hid, like the floodwaters which covered the earth during Noah's flood. In the act, laying the cloth upon themselves, in verse 23, the two sons of Noah intended to separate themselves from Noah's uncleanness. However, in laying the cloth upon their shoulder, an evil spirit of Elohim had descended upon Noah and his sons because of Noah's sin. This would cause them to turn on each other. This is especially true of Ham turning on Noah. In laying the cloth upon the shoulders of both of them, the nakedness of Noah's two sons was uncovered also, but they knew it not yet, for they were blameless. Okay, so this may be in reference to the eventual pollution that their lineages would suffer, also from the lineage that Noah and Ham had unleashed. In walking backward to their father, the brothers were returning to the place of a bitter water, adulterous judgment. Interesting. It could be like, remember remember in the book of the Kings, Steve, remember how it says an evil spirit went into the mouths of the false prophets and prophesied false. So it actually said it just went into the prophets and prophesied falsehood. It could imply the mission was about mischief, not necessarily that it was a demon, because according to the narrative there in the book of the Kings, this and also to Saul, it had a mission to work mischief as a form of judgment. So that could be what it means by evil spirit. It's a spirit that's a bearer of a mischievous mission. I think that's what's going at there. Okay, walking backwards indicates the brothers were reeling in a place of judgment with bad news. Their own special covenant relationship with Elohim was overturned, that their faces were turned away, indicating that Noah was in a defiled state and had lost the glory of Elohim. Look at that. From verse 24, we can surmise that Noah awoke in a fearful place for a man of Elohim. It is a place where angels visit. That Noah knew what he had yielded to himself relates that he knew he had had sexual relations with a woman and that Noah was now cursed. That Noah had yielded to himself relates that he had conceived a seed after his image. He had conceived a son. What Noah had yielded to himself relates to his son was the part of the defiled lower waters of creation. Now, basically, he's connecting this with the bitter waters trial here, which is emblematic of the Nephilim lineage. When Noah realized that he had made to himself was his youngest son, this means that his youngest son, Canaan, grew up to do wickedly because of the evil counsel of his mother, Ham's wife. Well, if Ham's wife had been a seductress and she had had Nephilim blood, then marriage would have meant nothing to her. She was simply looking for a way to take advantage of, well, think of it, the fallen angels, these watchers that came down on Mount Hermon. It says that they produced men of renown. powerful men, strong men, these Nephilim. And so maybe that Noah was looked upon as a source of power to her. Maybe that's why she took advantage of his drunken state, lured him into her tent, had relations with him. That Noah cursed Canaan in verse 25 relates that Noah's curse came upon Canaan was as Yahweh's curse upon the serpent Lilith and her seed in the garden. That Noah cursed Canaan to be a servant links Canaan to the defilement of the ground, which eventually necessitated the flood. This is the defilement of the Nephilim lineage. Canaan being cursed to be a servant also equates Canaan to Cain, and as such identifies Canaan as the bearer of a heavy curse that shall not be rescinded. His curse mirrors the curse against the serpent's seed, the Nephilim. That Canaan was cursed to be a servant of servants relates that Canaan would be the servant of the servants of Elohim in whom Yahweh had found iniquity, but who shall find redemption? This would be the servants of Elohim would find redemption. Okay, let me get this out of the way here. How do we get this next? Redemption for their condition. That Canaan would be a servant to his brothers refers to the relationship between an iniquitous man and his righteous brothers that is governed by strict oath and cursed. Okay, interesting there. Derivation of mystical implication from verse 21. Verse 21, the Hebrew word used to relate that Noah planted a vineyard and he drank wine from it is, looks like vashatha. Okay, vashatha is the prepositional prefix second person masculine imperfect verb form of the root shatha, which means to drink. The first exact spelling of vashatha elsewhere in the Bible comes in Genesis 25:34, where Esau sells his birthright to Jacob for lentils and some drink. This principle of first association mystically relates that Noah lost the honor of his lineage in this drinking. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. The Hebrew word in verse 21 for the wine which Noah drank is hayayin. It is the root yayin, which indicates grape wine or grapevine or wine plus a hay, definite article prefix. So it'd be the wine, essentially. The first exact spelling of hayayin elsewhere in the Bible occurs in Numbers 6:4. That passage concerns the solemn vows of the Nazarite not to drink wine. This principle of first association mentions that Noah's drinking broke a solemn vow he had made with Elohim. So maybe he should not have gotten drunk. That goes without saying. Look at this, Numbers 6:4. All the days of his separation shall he eat nothing that is made of the vine tree, from the kernels even to the husk. And so maybe as part of being this very blessed creature that was going to start this new lineage after the flood, it was almost like a Nazarene vow or a Nazarite vow not to. It was almost like what Samson, remember him? Samson, it was said that he was not to drink of the fruit of the vine because it clouds your mind, right? Clouds your mind. The Hebrew phrase in verse 21 relating how Noah drank from the vine is min ha-yayin. The only exact spelling of min ha-yayin elsewhere in the Bible comes in Isaiah 28:7. That passage relates how Israel's priests and prophets had erred and stumbled through wine. This principle of first association mystically relates that in Noah's drinking, he was a priest and prophet who erred. Because of the wine, he stumbled in judgment. One of the reasons probably why Israelite kings were forbidden to partake in that. There was a lot of injunctions against drinking wine, Israelite kings. Isaiah 28:7, and they also have erred through wine and through strong drink, are out of the way. The priest and the prophet had erred through strong drink. They are swallowed up of wine. They're out of the way through strong drink. They err in vision. They stumble in judgment. There is no exact spelling match for verse 21 and become drunk elsewhere in the Bible. Neither is there an exact spelling match for and he uncovered himself elsewhere in the Bible. Thus, no principle of first associations are pro-offered for these words. The Hebrew word in verse 21 relates how Noah uncovered himself in the midst of her tent is batavik. It is a prepositionally prefixed root of the form tavik, which means mist. Let's see here. The first exact spelling of batavik elsewhere in the Bible comes in Genesis 1:6, where Yahweh set a division in the midst of the waters, dividing the defiled lower waters of creation from the pure upper waters. This principle of first association mystically relates that in Noah's drinking from the wine, he existed in a division separating defiled lower waters of Nephilim lineage from the pure upper waters of Noah's lineage in Elohim. Okay, so we'll end here. Genesis 1:6, and Yahweh said, let there be a firmament in the midst of the waters and let it divide the waters from the waters. All right, so we'll mark that for next time. All right, guys. So that is a lot of very complex concepts there. But if you go through all of the possibles, basically what he's saying is the Hebrew word cannot be in reference to homosexual relations. So therefore Ham with his father Noah, that's out of the running. And the idea that there's two ways this other word could be interpreted, 3 out of the 4 in the way that it's interpreted suggest that the alternative way that most of your modern scholars have interpreted, they would say, well, Ham with Noah's wife, but it suggests that it really was Ham's wife with Noah. If you go by, the number of times, the way that it's used in other places of the Bible. Okay, shalom, shalom, brother. Any comments? Go ahead, Vicky.
I found it in the mechanical translation of Genesis.
Okay.
It mentions in verse I found it. Let's see, in verse 21, and he gulped from the wine, and he became drunk and removed his cover in the midst of her tent.
What's the chapter and verse, please?
That's chapter 9.
Okay.
Of Genesis. That's verse 21.
Okay.
And let's see, and removed his cover in the midst of her tent, and Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father, and he told his 2 brothers in the outside. And Shem and Japheth took the apparel and set it in place on the shoulder of the 2 of them, and they walked backward. They concealed the nakedness of their father, and their faces were backward, and the nakedness of their father they did not see. And Noah, this is interesting to me. And Noah awoke from his wine, and he knew what his small son did to him. And he said, spit it upon is Canaan. He will exist as a servant of servants to his brothers. So I'm wondering because it takes a while to grow a vineyard. I mean, this isn't something that happened like a week after they,
Right.
exited out, right? So could it be that this event took place some years afterward, and Canaan was an older child? Because isn't it true that sometimes in the Old Testament, son, grandson can be interchangeable? And maybe it is a curse upon Canaan in particular for something that he did. Not Ham, but Canaan.
You mean the very act of sexual relations with what, Noah's wife? That's what you're positing?
Well, no, because it does say in this translation that he was found naked in her tent. You know, imagine the tents all look the same. He stumbled into the wrong one. He's drunk, right? So, you know, he's drunk. He goes into the wrong tent, passes out, and it's something that Canaan has done. And he could be older. I mean, he could, you know, he could be a teenager. He could be old. And because he specifically curses Canaan. So
Right.
I'm not saying if maybe, you know, Canaan did something to entice, you know, his grandfather to sleep with his mother or something of that nature. I mean, I don't know. I'm just, you know, but it's
Yeah.
interesting that it says what his small son did to him, which could be his youngest son, but it could also be his grandson. Is that right? Or, I mean, that part
Potentially,
right?
I don't know, depending on what the grandson might be, there might be something, it would, depends on what the Hebrew is there, I guess. I could look at it,
I
ultimately,
can send you, I'll send you a screenshot later because it has it in the Hebrew
okay,
too. And, you know, right above it, each verse, it's got the Hebrew right above it.
yeah,
So-
now, ultimately, you have to explain how the Nephilim reinfected the earth after the flood. And that's all part and parcel of trying to figure this out.
Right. And it could be that Ham's wife, you know, her offspring, or maybe one of the, except for Shem, maybe one of the other brothers, because Japheth is the one that is going to, you know, be inside of Shem's tent. So it's Ham that is not inside of Shem's tent. So it could be that it is because of her wife, his wife, where the Nephilim came from. But I just thought that was interesting about the, you know, when he saw what his small son did to him.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
thought that was
very interesting. Yeah, let's send me a screenshot of that. I'd like to look at that.
I will. I sure will.
Okay, well, this is, remember that this is just the Lilith theory. We're going through this material as something to think about. To myself, to consider that there was a second infestation from heaven, I don't see any clue for that. Seems like that would be a very significant event that would merit one of the holy texts making some mention of it. Really, largely the Bible, at least on its face, without really going into the depth of the issues, as this book attempts to, is somewhat silent about how the Nephilim still infiltrated after the flood. But when we start getting into these deeper, look at this text in the Hebrew and so on, and process of logical deduction, process of elimination, this theory is a contender. It is a contender. And of course, you know, it makes me wonder how in the world would Noah have even allowed a Nephilim hybrid to get on his ark? I mean, that does seem to implicate a lack of judgment too, or at least a lack of divine knowledge, you know?
Yeah, because if you remember from the movie, and I know it's a movie, I get the movie thing, but do you remember in the movie that Tubal Cain, they implied that Tubal Cain had survived. He was
Yeah,
outside of the ark, but he was there
yeah,
later.
yeah. Yeah,
I
it
don't
does. It did
if that-
imply that, but Tubal Cain was shown as being simply a man beguiled by the fallen angels or the watchers would fall and had taught mankind warfare. See, it never shows him in that movie with Russell Crowe, I think is what you're referencing, as being a watcher or a giant.
Right. It
Simply
just
shows
shows
him
that
as a normal man who is partaking of the knowledge, the forbidden knowledge that was passed down to mankind, which is to engage in war, the use of metals and creating weapons of war to give yourself superiority over other people. You know, but clearly after the flood in the times of David, there were giants that were so large and frightening that even in the time of, when Moses and the children of Israel and the two spies that came back and gave a positive report, but there were 12 that went. They 10 of them were stone cold, frightened out of their mind at what they saw in Canaan. It must have been the size, the sheer, a frightening, a view for them. And that was just Joshua and Caleb came back and said, hey, we can still whip these guys. We got the Elohim of Israel. We got the Elohim of Israel. He's bigger than these guys. Remember that? So
like grasshoppers.
What's that?
He said we were like grasshoppers to them.
Yeah, we were like grasshoppers in their sight. So it must have been these giants were all over the place there. Somehow there was an infestation that happened. So if you believe that it was Ham having relations with Noah's wife, well, then that's even worse for Noah, isn't it? Because
it is. And I think
in the world, I mean, how does Noah allow, or how is Noah? I mean, that really
he's drunk. He is drunk and passed out. Don't you expect he's drunk and passed out? Because he didn't know what was going on until after he woke up from his wine.
Right, but
in today's time, we would say he's passed out and now he's woken up and he's got a hangover.
Yes, but remember that Noah's generations were perfect in all his generations. Ham was perfect.
Noah was.
In his genetic essence.
Right. And I wonder if that has something to do too, what you had read earlier about how Lamech was so afraid when he was born. Maybe he was born with the same light that Adam was born with. Because he was perfect in his generations. He was a preacher of righteousness. He was perfect. So maybe he had that same initial light that Adam and Eve had, at least maybe for a time. Or maybe he had the veil over him. Have you ever heard of people who have claimed that they were born with the veil over their face? Have you ever heard of that before?
No. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if it was Ham and Noah's wife, and you're saying the Nephilim came from that union, from Canaan, then either Ham or Noah's wife had to have been the hybrid. And I think we can safely say Ham is out of the running. By process of deduction, we're saying that it is an outside genetic. It's something outside the family, because it says Noah was perfect in all his generations. Well, that includes Ham. That includes, well, it has to be his wife too. It's got to be his wife too, because Ham, Shem, and Japheth came from the union of Noah and his wife.
Maybe.
They had to have been purely Adamic race. So what are the choices? It's either Shem's wife, it's either Japheth's wife, or it's Ham's wife.
I'm not convinced that Noah's wife is their mother, because everywhere else in the Bible, it tells you who their mother is. Mother, specifically, they say mother. Hannah and Eli. I mean, the mother. It's always the mother, but she is never. And I know she's not mentioned more than a handful of times, but she's always referred to as Noah's wife. Maybe their mother died
That's,
and
oh, that's,
remarried.
that
I
is,
mean, it's speculation, but
and then, so then if that's the case, then maybe his new wife had Nephilim blood in it, and that's how the Nephilim.
it's possible. I mean, it is, you know, I mean, we have to do some kind of extrapolation and speculation
Right, in order to
to a
get,
degree.
right, in order to get to how the giants, I mean, how the Nephilim reinfected.
Right.
Right.
And
I mean,
just
that's the
because
crux of the
if
matter.
Noah got drunk, went into his daughter-in-law's tent and did have relations with her, that doesn't mean that she conceived just because they had relations. Not necessarily. The sin, that's sin. If that's what happened, that in and of itself is bad. You know, you don't have to have an offspring from that union to make the union itself bad. It's
But
just
there
bad to
obviously
begin
was
with.
an offspring because
From
the
no,
offspring was cursed, whether it's Ham's wife and Noah or whether it's Noah's wife and Ham.
you don't think that Canaan was already there? How can he come out and say, "Cursed be Canaan," when he wakes up the next day? Cursed be Canaan. Canaan had to already be there. He
Well,
had to be.
it could be that it doesn't necessarily say the next day. What if Canaan was born and then Noah saw the likeness of himself in Canaan and then realized what had happened?
Well, my son looks a lot like my father.
You know,
You know, he has, because that's his grandfather, you know?
yeah. These are all very interesting theories, and yes, what
Really.
you postulate, if you say if you're suggesting that maybe this wasn't even Ham, Shem, or Japheth's mother, this was another wife that the Noah, and then that's where the Nephilim lineage came from.
It's just always struck me that she was never referred to as their mother. She's only
Yeah, it is a possibility. It is a possibility. I have no information to strongly dispute the possibility.
Yeah.
You know.
It's a very vague story in many ways.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, but either way, I've always felt that the idea that fallen angels came down again and reinfested, that could not be considered, because that would be such a momentous event. It would have been recorded somewhere. So it has to be one of these two possibilities.
It has to be, because there's no way, Yahweh, why bother destroying everything in the earth only to have to drop those down?
Right.
You
Right.
know, it has to have come from someplace that was left on earth. I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is all very interesting, and there is a lot, you know, I kind of always, you know, sort of, you know, tongue in cheek sort of have said throughout the years, you know, one thing's for sure, if Moses wrote the first 5 books of the Bible, you know, he definitely wasn't interested in getting a literary prize for it, because he was very ambiguous in so many places.
Mhm. Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
you know, but
Yeah.
I guess it's hard to write about something that happened when you weren't there. You know, I don't know, but it is very interesting. I sure do appreciate it a bunch.
All
This
right.
story fascinates me about
Yeah.
Cain.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I wanted to delve into it, because number one, the entire Lilith theory indicates why there's such a veneration among the witches of Lilith and among the ultra left feminist, why there's such a veneration. And I don't think they picked that name out of their head and said, this is going to be our object. Everything that is being focused around with regard to evil has an ancient source. There's an ancient source there. All right, guys, great discussion. We'll try to pick this up another time. If we have another cancellation, I'll try to slip it in somehow. And, you know, it's a good backup study.
Yeah, well, it's good. I mean, I like it too. Let me ask you a real quick question before we go. I guess you're going to do some editing on this before you post it, right?
I really don't do too much editing. In fact, I don't do any editing usually.
Oh, okay. Because I was going to ask you about, you know, where Tucker Carlson's Twitter stuff was.
Oh, okay. That's on Twitter. Just go to Tucker Carlson on Twitter. That's all.
Yeah, I didn't know if you.
How about I
thought-
send you a link? I'll send you a link, okay?
Okay, all right, that's
Okay.
good.
Yeah. All right. Shalom, shalom, guys. I thought it was Alt Q. Alt Q. There we go. Maybe it's not Alt Q. Oy vey. Yes, it is Alt Q. There we go.